This episode of Good Living Now is sponsored by Coolings. Now, I've had almost every brand of juicer on the market during my healing journey, but the Coolings brand is by far my favorite. I love it because it's super easy to clean. It saves me prep time because I'm able to put whole cucumbers and celery and carrots into the machine so I don't waste time trying to prep and cut things up. It also is very versatile. It allows me to make sorbets and smoothies as well as my own plant-based milk. So for me, Coolings has been a game changer. So we want to thank our friends at Coolings for sponsoring this episode. Now, enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Good Living Now podcast, where we talk to real people about real change leading to real health. I am your host, Harold LaFall, and today we're going to have a very important conversation about health and nutrition. I know there's so much misinformation that's floating around there, you don't know what to believe. But our guest today, he is a certified nutritionist and fitness coach who has helped hundreds of his clients reverse chronic illness through nutrition. His name is Remson Noire. Welcome to the show, Remson. There you are.
Right.
How you
Here
doing,
we
man?
go. Okay. Doing pretty good today. You know what I mean? Happy Sunday. Nice weather out and everything. How about yourself?
Good, man. Man, I'm so glad to have you because there's so much misinformation that's going on out in these social media streets about nutrition. Folks just don't know what to believe. They don't know, if this is right. And if you hear something enough, you start to believe it's the truth. It may not be based on anything scientific, but if enough people say something over and over again, you start to believe that these things are true. So I wanted to have you come on because I know you've helped so many people reverse chronic illness through nutrition. So I know you were going to come on and give us the truth about what you have seen with some of your clients in nutrition. And one of the first things I want to ask you about, because I get this a lot because I juice a lot. And I always get this comment about, aren't you afraid about diabetes consuming so much fruit? Now, can people actually get diabetes from eating too much fruit?
No. There's no scientific evidence that says that's possible.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not logistically possible, right? So the primary cause for insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes is saturated fat intake, right? It's a congestion of the liver. There are studies that shows that high levels of fructose can worsen insulin resistance, but that's not those studies that have demonstrated that data. They didn't use fruit to do it. They actually used water solutions with fructose injected into it, right? So it was like a water and fructose solution that they fed to like rats, right?
Mm-hmm.
They weren't done with actual fruit or diet plans, right? So there is currently no scientific evidence whatsoever that shows that diabetes can be caused by fruit consumption or even worsened by fruit consumption.
Wow. Now,
Yeah.
see, that's a big thing because we hear that a lot. But you mentioned saturated fats. So what's the connection with saturated fat in type 2 diabetes? And what are saturated fats? Because I think we hear that a lot and a lot of people don't know what that really is.
Yeah, so basically saturated fat, you have different types of fats: saturated fat, polyunsaturated fat, and monounsaturated fat. And then of course there's trans fats. And these different types of fats have a certain molecular structure, right? Saturated fat is typically found in animal products, right? And that's the one that's been clinically shown to cause mitochondrial dysfunction, insulin resistance, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, right? However, the opposite is true for poly and monounsaturated fats, right? So the current epidemiological data that we have shows that polyunsaturated fats and monounsaturated fats actually are beneficial to reversing insulin resistance and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, whereas saturated fat makes it worse and induces mitochondrial dysfunction.
What would be an example of what did you say?
Yeah, polyunsaturated fats. So this
What
would
would be an
come
example
from
of that?
things like avocado, nuts and seeds, mainly plant-based food sources. This can also come from certain types of fish as well. That's largely due to the fact that the fish with the polyunsaturated fat sources consume algae and other sea vegetables and things like that, which contain those polyunsaturated fats.
Okay. Okay. So eating fruit is not going to cause you to get that type 2 diabetes.
No, no. There's actually
Okay.
clinical data that shows that more fruit consumption in your diet actually improves insulin sensitivity and aids in weight loss.
Mm.
Yeah.
Now, while we're talking about fruit, there's also this widespread belief on these internet streets that seedless grapes and seedless watermelons are somehow harmful to you if you eat. I've even seen some comments that say that eating seedless watermelon can cause cancer. Is that true?
I mean, they would have to produce the scientific data that demonstrates that.
Mm-hmm.
And they would also have to demonstrate what is the mechanism inside these fruits that would cause that. What is the carcinogen or microtoxin that would cause that?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So far, everyone who I've asked this have not been able to show that. Right. So this is an evidence-free claim. Right.
Evidence-free claim. Mm-hmm.
It's an evidence-free claim. So people say it, they heard other people say it, and they repeat it, but it's an evidence-free claim. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Also, there's a big misunderstanding where people think that, first of all, there's no such thing as a seedless fruit.
Mm.
There is no such thing as all fruit has seeds. There is no such thing as a seedless fruit. What they actually mean is fruits with immature seeds and a lack of mature seeds. So mature seeds are hard, solid, kind of crunchy seeds. Immature
Mm-hmm.
seeds are often soft, right?
So
So
it's those white little seeds you see in
yeah,
watermelon.
yeah.
Those are still seeds.
Right,
Okay.
right, right.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing in your typical like yellow banana, right? You know
Mm-hmm.
those little brown and black specks that are in the middle of a
Right.
conventional yellow banana? Those are
Mm-hmm.
seeds,
Mm.
right? So yeah, there's no such thing as a seedless fruit.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about things like I hear folks say that things like carrots and pineapples aren't really fruit. They're some kind of hybrid.
I mean, all of the vegetables that we have currently available are hybrids,
Mm.
right? So I mean that doesn't I mean us as human beings we're hybrids, right?
Mm.
So I mean just everything that exists on the planet today is a hybrid of something prior.
Right.
So the more so essentially what happens is you have a biological life form, and the longer it survives, the more genetic mutations it goes through, and then gradually
Mm-hmm.
it turns into something different, and then eventually other species will then cause it to migrate to other areas. Let's say you have animals and they'll eat a certain fruit or something like that, and then they'll travel and they'll lay fecal matter in some other area, and a crop will grow in a different area. It'll combine with other things in that environment, and this is how you get hybrids naturally. Human beings will
Mm.
splice different fruits together and grow them together, and they'll kind of graft into each other or form like a new type of fruit, and this is
Right.
like an organic process. Now you can do it deliberately, but it's still an organic process.
Another thing that I hear a lot, because I'm now high raw. One of the things that I often hear about protein, oh my God, you're not getting enough protein. Where are you going to get your protein from? Because it seems like we've been conditioned to think that we need to eat meat and other things like that to get protein. What do you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the least amount of protein I get within a given day is like maybe 90 grams.
Mm-hmm.
But I get around on average in between 110 to 130.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Most people eat too much protein, right?
Mm. Mm.
Now you can show that in our society today, we eat more protein and have poorer health outcomes. And our population is getting weaker, and testosterone is declining, and muscle mass is declining, even though we're eating more protein.
Mm. So wait a minute. So a lot of people think that you need to eat a lot of protein for muscle.
Yeah, that's not true.
Mm.
It's actually not true.
Hmm.
Um, so
And
every
you know what?
yeah,
I wanted to say this too, and I know that to be true for myself because I know when I first started eating more raw, I was concerned about protein consumption, and so I started taking these protein supplements, and I took them for about a year, and then I stopped taking them, and I didn't notice a change. I didn't notice a difference. I didn't lose any muscle mass or anything like that.
yeah. So basically, for every nutrient in the human diet, uh, they all have codependent relationships with something else,
Hmm.
right? So protein has a codependent relationship with carbohydrates.
Hmm.
So they have to be packaged together, right?
Mm.
Um, Carbohydrates are packaged together, kind of like a good balance between the two would be like a 4-to-1 or a 3-to-1 ratio, right? So it could be like um, for every, so let's say if your total macros is 400 grams of carbs, then you would have like a minimum of 100 grams of protein or something like that.
Hmm.
So it would be like a ratio like that. But the thing about protein is there needs to be um, muscle protein synthesis if we're talking
Hmm.
about like branched chain amino acids. When people talk about proteins, what they're really talking about is a protein that is made out of branched chain amino acids, right? Valine, leucine, and isoleucine. That's particularly what they're talking about, right? There's all
Hmm.
kinds of amino acids,
Hmm.
right? It's like I think on record, some people say it's 19, some people say it's like 21. It depends because there's like one amino acid that can have multiple different forms. I'm not going to go into all of that. But amino acids have all of these different functions. They create neurotransmitters, they create bone tissue, bone marrow, muscle tissue, enzymes, all types of stuff, right? Protein creates cholesterol and all types of stuff. So when people talk about protein, what they really mean is just like for muscle mass or hair, skin, and nail cells or something, right? And people put this emphasis on protein as a cultural thing. It's not a science backed thing, it's a cultural thing.
Mm.
Because just because you have a high amount of protein in your diet does not mean that that's a way of maximizing muscle protein synthesis, which is basically your body's use of the amino acids to create new tissues like muscle mass, right?
Hmm.
So if you're magnesium deficient, I don't care how much protein you consume, you're not really going to be building much muscle mass, if any, if you're
Hmm.
magnesium deficient, right?
Mm.
And on record, being that at least 40% of the population is magnesium deficient, you have a lot of people struggling to build lean muscle mass and just failing at it because they're magnesium deficient. But there's not a premium on magnesium culturally when we talk about food,
Right.
right?
Mm.
And so basically, you just have 1 in 3 people have a metabolic disorder, okay? So basically, if there's 3 people in a room, chances are one of them have a metabolic disorder.
Hmm.
All right. So they got some type of insulin resistance, or, they're either at or close to fatty liver disease, non alcoholic fatty liver disease. They probably have some type of thyroid issue or something going on. Right. And a lot of this stems back to a deficiency in magnesium. Magnesium is pretty much a mineral that is like the backbone of all of the metabolic processes in the human body. Right.
Mm. Hmm.
So muscle mass, bone mass, testosterone, brain chemistry, none of this stuff is even close to optimal levels if you're deficient in magnesium. Most magnesium deficiency flies under the radar and it's not even diagnosed because it's not picked up in a blood test, because most of your magnesium is stored inside your muscle tissue and in your bone tissue and your rest of your lean mass. It's not
Hmm.
stored inside your blood. right? It's like calcium. You're not supposed to have much of it in your bloodstream. It's
Right.
an alkalizing element that's supposed to be stored inside your lean mass to help preserve your lean mass. If you have a deficiency in the magnesium, you end up losing the lean mass, and it's very difficult to gain it back without that magnesium.
So how do we know if we have a magnesium deficiency, and what are some sources of magnesium?
So the overwhelming majority, almost every single magnesium source, like 99% of all magnesium sources is going to be plant-based. Magnesium is a water-soluble mineral that's typically found in freshwater sources, plants, fruits, nuts and seeds, grains, legumes, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So one of the best habits that you can have, especially for somebody like me who eats a lot of fruit, is eating a ton of bananas. So like 6, 7, or 8 bananas at a time. Okay. And you can get like 150 to 200% of your magnesium from that, because bananas are very high in magnesium. Right. So another source would be like mangoes, cantaloupe, fruits like that. Right. Then other really good magnesium sources are going to be pumpkin seed kernels, almonds, peanuts, things like that, quinoa, rolled oats, right? Things of this nature.
Gotcha.
The minimum, and this is the clinical standard, is 420 milligrams of magnesium per day, right? I would say that that's the floor. That's the minimal amount of magnesium that you should be getting per day. Magnesium is typically stored in the body for 12 to 16 hours, right? And then any extra magnesium that's left over gets excreted out of the body.
Gotcha.
So essentially, your body stores magnesium over time, right? And then once your storages are full, whatever excess amounts that don't really have anywhere to go, they get flushed out, right? And that typically happens through your kidneys.
Gotcha.
Right.
So, so I know one of the things you said, that in order to build muscle, you have to have magnesium, have to have a sufficient amount of magnesium. But what are some symptoms that a person might be deficient in magnesium? Like
muscle fatigue, muscle spasms, muscle loss, bone loss, anxiety, depression, gut health issues, obesity,
Gotcha.
high blood pressure, fatty liver disease, kidney disease. Basically,
wow. Magnesium affects all that.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So chances are you're magnesium deficient if you're experiencing any of those issues. Low testosterone, adrenal fatigue, poor sleep quality.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, let's talk about the metabolism. You mentioned it just a bit, but there's this idea, I know people my age, particularly 50 and older, that feel as though your metabolism slows down as you get older. Is that a real thing, or is there something else going on?
Logistically, that's true, but not because of time itself. So you have physiological aging, and then you have chronological aging. These are two kind of separate things. They run parallel to each other, but they deviate depending on your lifestyle choices, right? So they're not intrinsically linked. When you're older, you tend to not be as active on a cellular level, right? You're not going through growth spurts. You're not going through peak hormonal changes, this kind of thing, right? When you're younger, you're growing, you're literally growing in all aspects. I mean, you're getting taller, your whole bone structure is changing, your body's releasing all types of hormones, all of this type of stuff. That pretty much caps out at around 28, 30 years old, right? This is where people start feeling the aging process, because there's this peaking of all of this metabolic and hormonal behavior and growth, and then it stabilizes out, right? We subtly react to that leveling out by decreasing in certain lifestyle habits. Exercise, we don't eat as much of the right things. Typically, we just live a less active lifestyle.
Right.
right? Um, and then we become not as health conscious as we should be, right? We start often under eating. We're sitting too much at work. We're working really long hours. We're stressed from paying bills. And your life is more stressful typically as an adult because you have way more responsibility, which means that there's going to be more self neglect. When you're
Mm.
younger, you can get away with it. But the thing is that the things that you do when you're younger, they rack up against you by the time you hit 30 years old. And then by the time you're 35 years old, you really feel it in particular.
Right. Right.
Right. Um, and so it becomes this subtle thing where your lifestyle changes really affect your metabolism and everything straight across the board. And we think, oh, this is just aging. And it's like, well, no, it's your lifestyle habits.
It's your lifestyle. Yeah.
Right. So now let's say, here's the one thing that gets people. They start gaining weight, and their first response is, oh, I'm gaining weight. I want to lose weight, so I'm going to eat less. So then they
Mm.
eat less. And if the weight's not coming off quick enough, they cut their food intake even more. And they start cut,
Mm-hmm.
cut, 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 cut. And then they take on a lifestyle of under eating. And if you're underfed, chances are you become malnourished over time.
Mm. You know what? You said something in one of your videos that I found interesting. You said that most people who are dealing with obesity, it's not because they overeat.
Yeah, it's
We
because they
typically
undereat.
just see because they undereat. Talk about that because I think we typically associate people being obese or overweight is because they are eating too much.
Yeah. So that ties into that lack of magnesium thing. Obviously, if you're eating less and your water is desalinated and is stripped of all of its mineral balance, you're not getting the magnesium from your water either. So
There's
you're not getting
wait,
as
there's
much zinc.
magnesium. There's magnesium in water.
Yes. There's also
Okay,
supposed to be B12 in your water.
okay, just
So
regular
you're
spring
getting,
water.
right. So you're getting
Okay.
less of the minerals. You're getting
Mhm.
less carbohydrates because, a big thing that people do is they cut their carbohydrate intake, thinking that's going to help them to lose more weight. They start doing more exercise. They're still working the long hours. They're going to bed really late. They're waking up really early. And what happens is this is how you drive yourself into metabolic disability because you're underfed and overworked. And this becomes a lifestyle, right? Most adults identify with this: underfed, overworked, right?
Mm.
Now throw in other lifestyle factors: smoking, having drinks at the bar with friends, alcoholic beverages. They take processed sugar and alcohol and then combine them together in a drink and then have a few of those in a night and do it like every weekend or every other weekend. It's the worst thing you can do for your liver, right? It's an insulin resistance cocktail. That's what it is, right? If you want to destroy your metabolism, alcohol is the best way to do it. And then mixing sugar with it even more so,
Wow.
right? It's similar to what donuts do, right? So alcohol is like drinking fat, right? Your liver has to convert that alcohol into a form of fat in order to neutralize it,
Hmm.
right? So donuts, sugar, and fat is pretty much what donuts are made of, right? Pastries in general is typically what they're made of: sugar, fat. Alcoholic beverages, like them sweet drinks that people drink, same thing: sugar, alcohol. Alcohol converts into fat in your liver. So you
Mm.
overwork your liver with this because all of your cells in your body can't use this stuff and it's
Hmm.
toxic, right? So if you do that as a lifestyle thing where you hang out with your friends and then you smoke hookah or you smoke marijuana or whatever the case is. Now marijuana can be medicinal, but smoke inhalation is bad, period. Doesn't matter what you're inhaling. If it's
Mm.
smoke, it's bad, period. Anything that reduces oxygen uptake. And what reduces oxygen uptake? Alcohol and inhaling smoke, right? If you reduce the amount of oxygen uptake, you're literally killing the cells in your body because you're
Mm.
diminishing oxygen, which is what your cells need constantly. Every second of the day, your body needs that oxygen. If you deplete your oxygen, you kill your cells. This is why people get drunk and they feel lightheaded and all of that, because you're killing brain cells. You're starving your brain of oxygen. You're starving all the cells in your body of oxygen, right? People even lose their vision. It's a lack of oxygen. This is literally organ failure.
Mm.
right? In order for your body to engage in thermogenesis, any type of metabolic behavior that requires oxygen, right? If you cut oxygen, even if you have an abundance of glucose, you're not really going to be able to effectively utilize that glucose because you're missing the oxygen,
Mm.
right? Your body can momentarily use glucose when there's a shortage of oxygen, but you can do that over a period of like 10 to 20 seconds. And then after that, there's a massive decline. And then you just end up with acid, right? And this ultimately leads to the further depletion of magnesium, which contributes to magnesium deficiency, bone loss, muscle loss, etc.
Mm.
And then you
So
combine that with
all
under eating and poor food choices, and you know.
and you know we definitely don't hear enough about the hazards of alcohol consumption and on our health. And people think, you know, it's recreational, I can have a drink and it's not doing anything. But what you're saying, this poses a serious potential damage to our organs.
Oh yeah, it's poison. It's
Mm.
literally poison. Yeah, it's literally it's poison. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
L- Let's talk about dairy. A lot of people think that we need dairy, milk and cheese and stuff for bone health. You know, we were brought up that milk does the body good. Does it really do the body good?
No, no. So that was propaganda for the dairy industry, post World War II,
Mm.
right? I believe it's actually, what was it, post World War I or World War II? I'm not sure when that originally started. I want to say post World War II, whenever that whole milkman thing started, right?
Right,
Because they had a surplus of milk powder after the war that they were using for rations for the military, right? So you have this big abundance of this stuff. You got to make some money back on it, right? Help rebuild your economy,
right.
right? Because the war is
Mm.
over. Obviously, there's going to be some, now you got to economically rebuild and you got to restructure your economy because you're no longer in wartime,
Mm.
right? So you have all of this leftover milk powder. You have all of this abundance of dairy farms, and all of this massive dairy production. Well, how do you monetize it? Well, we're going to advertise dairy on television, got milk commercials, right? Does the body good, builds strong bones, calcium, yada, yada.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's weird
Mm-hmm.
is we know clinically that calcium has a codependent relationship with magnesium. It is extremely bizarre and disingenuous to put an emphasis on calcium and not magnesium
Mm.
because they have a codependent relationship. It's kind of like if you were to go out with your spouse and everybody walked up to you and greeted you and never even acknowledged the existence of your spouse. It's bizarre. It's
Right.
offensive. It's weird behavior.
Right.
That's very
Right.
unnatural, right? We do the same thing with anemia, with the focus is on iron and not on copper and vitamin C, which are essential in order to create the necessary hemoglobin to reverse anemia,
Mm.
right? So it's this kind of thing. You when people just talk about like this one mineral and they talk about it in a vacuum, it's kind of like people talk about sugar in a vacuum and they don't talk about it in
Right.
relationship to anything else. So they say fruit is just filled with sugar, and they act like, oh, just fruit are just bowls of sugar and nothing else. It's odd, right? It's very weird. It's a very weird, unnatural way to talk about things, right? Um, so, and this is how you can tell it's largely propaganda. Now, the problem with dairy in particular is, first of all, dairy is inflammatory to most people, about 70-75% of the population.
Mm-hmm.
And a large part of that is lactose intolerance, which is
Mm-hmm.
highest among us Black folks and pretty much,
Mm-hmm.
just non-white Europeans are the
Right.
ones that are kind of used to the whole dairy consumption thing, but it's even harming them. So you see the highest rates of degenerative bone disease is typically in Northern Europe, in these areas where they consume the most dairy.
Mm-hmm.
So the inverse is true. It's actually harmful to your bones. But then you have casein, which is a type of protein that's very addictive into the human brain. It has the same effects as an opioid does,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's addictive like that in order to hook a baby to its mother to keep coming back to feed. So it's meant to be addictive. It's not for adults because you're not supposed to be consuming dairy like that as adults because your body is already fully formed.
All
So
right.
you don't need this infusion of all of these of all of these raw nutrients from dairy, right? Um, so then you've got high levels of saturated fat, high levels of sugar from dairy, galactose, right, which is inflammatory in and of itself. And there's clinical data that shows that galactose literally causes cellular aging. It ages you, galactose, right? Cheese put this on steroids. Cheese enhances that opiate effect on the brain. All right. Cheese enhances the effects of those caseinoids from the casein protein. It enhances the effects of the galactose. And it makes the dairy more acidic, which actually causes more calcium and magnesium to be leached from your bone tissue because dairy is very acidic in general. And if
Right.
it's pasteurized, a lot of the important enzymes and minerals like that magnesium is destroyed in that process of pasteurizing.
Uh,
So whatever
So if you
beneficial bacteria was in the dairy are destroyed in that process, and you end up with excess levels of estrogen, galactose, lactose that your body can't even process if you don't have the efficient levels of lactase, and then you have the addicting drug effects of the caseinoids.
that is so true about that dairy because that was one of the last things when I was transitioning off of the standard American diets. Dairy was the most difficult thing for me to give up. The
Hmm.
cheeses and the ice cream because I literally was like I would eat a gallon of ice cream. I would eat cheese just by itself. I didn't eat anything, and that was a staple in my diet. And so it was when I was diagnosed with prostate cancer, I
That'll
discovered
do
that there
it.
was a correlation. Yeah, and I'm
That'll
like,
do
I
it.
was doing, and none of my doctors, not my oncologist, not my urologist, or our primary physician said nothing about diet when they diagnosed me with prostate cancer or didn't ask me anything about what I was eating. So I could have very well, after I had the surgery, gone back to eating the same way that I had eaten before, and I would have gotten the same outcome. It was all
Yeah,
the cancer came back. If you if
it
you
would have
don't
came back
change,
worse.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of us people, you talked about black folks. In our community, there's this belief that high blood pressure runs in our family. Oh yeah,
Nope.
Aunt Beth got high blood pressure. Is that a real thing, or is that just
No.
something we making up?
So well, there's a mixed bag of that, right? If we really want to be nuanced about it, so we have the epigenetic effects of systemic racism, chattel slavery, etc. So it's this trauma that is passed from generation to generation, right? So if you are, a foundational, Black American from the United States, or you can trace your lineage back to people who were priorly enslaved or whatever the case is and went through all of this violence, systemic racism, etc. Um, this is passed down to you through epigenetics. So it's baked into the code of your DNA, so to speak, right? So it affects you behaviorally. It shows up in inflammatory markers in your body and all this type of stuff. Our medical system does not want to touch that, right? Because the last thing our medical system wants to do is highlight the effects of systemic racism in our healthcare
Right.
system, right?
Mhm.
Because the whole thing is let's act like it doesn't exist, right? Let's just
Right.
paper over that, right?
Right.
Because then
Right.
that
Right.
leads into things like reparations and all of this, et cetera. We don't want to feed
Mhm.
that, right? We don't want to strengthen
Right.
that narrative, right? So let's not touch
Right.
that.
Right.
But so inflammation and trauma can cause vascular constriction, which is an inflammatory response that we call high blood pressure, hypertension. But that's just from the stress you experience on a mental and emotional level, and it translates into even physiological markers, right?
Right.
So it doesn't run in your family, it runs in your demographic,
Right.
right?
Right.
Now, is it related to your food? Yes. And food actually is one of the primary drivers because your food dictates how your body responds to whatever other peripheral stresses you have in your life,
Mm.
right? Your food can change the physiological state of your body in real time in a matter of seconds. So I've had people, just about everybody, reverse their high blood pressure when they did what I told them to
Mm.
do. Pretty much is like we're at 100% success rate with that.
Wow.
High blood pressure is not a disease, it's an indicator of disease.
Hmm.
So the goal is not to lower your blood pressure. The goal is to address and correct the thing that's causing the high blood pressure. That's how you fix
Right.
your high blood pressure.
Mm. Hmm. So, Remson, I know so many people right now who are dealing with chronic health issues and illnesses. What is one thing that you would suggest someone who is wanting to reverse a condition? What's just a couple of simple things that they could do?
Um, well, number one would be cut out all animal products in your diet, right? Um, so there's a zero-sum game that happens in your food choices. Your food is either helping to heal you or drive you deeper into illness. It's either or, right? It's really what it is. It's either or. Those are your two options. There's not really anything in between.
Hmm.
So human beings are not really designed to eat animal products. You can get away with it. There's a lot of things that you shouldn't do, but in emergency situations, your body will allow you to get away with it.
Right.
But it's not optimal, right? This is why in population data it shows that, like, yeah, people who live further away from the equator, they live more in colder regions where there's not really much plant life or things that grow. So they have no choice but to like fish or hunt or whatever because there's no plant life around to really eat. They don't live that long. The average life expectancy is around 45 or something. It's very low, right? And the primary cause of death is heart attack and cancer, right? And the primary cancer is colon cancer, right? Colon cancer is explicitly diet,
Hmm.
right? Um, Diet is the deal breaker. That is the thing that decides whether or not you're going to have a massive outburst of colon cancer that just spreads throughout your body, um, or you just don't get it at all, right? And then populations that have more of a plant-based dominant diet have the longest life expectancies, right? People often refer to these as the blue zones,
Mm.
right? Which are typically closer to the equator, right? So there's population data that supports that. There's clinical data, all kind of epidemiological data that demonstrates this. So plant-based diet, also a high raw diet. So the majority of your foods come from uncooked food sources, and that's typically going to be your fruits primarily, some vegetables, nuts and seeds. Rolled oats, you can do overnight oats where you don't have to cook them at all. You just soak them, right? So you can get away with that too. And that's what I'm a big fan of. I do raw organic overnight oats.
Mm.
Um, so that's two where they're kind of,
Hmm.
first plant-based and high raw.
Right.
Third could be magnesium supplementation.
Gotcha.
Because if you have a chronic illness, chances are you have some type of magnesium deficiency.
Deficiency. So, Remson, if someone wanted to get in contact with you, because you do one-on-one, you work with individuals one-on-one, how would they do that? How can folks find you, set up a one-on-one appointment with you? How can they do that?
Yeah, so people can go to my website, tribebynoir.com, and I also have another one, tribebynoir.tv, and you can book a call with me. You pick whatever time you want. You'll be asked some questions. What are your top 3 goals? What are your biggest struggles? Have you had coaching experience before? Are you on any medications? Do you have any allergies? That kind of thing. And then what do you want to focus most on the call? And we have an hour to go through all of your questions and work out a strategy and everything like that on the call. You can also, from my website, either trybenoire.com or trybenoire.tv, you can sign up for personalized coaching or become a tribe member, right? So not only do I specialize in nutrition and creating nutrition plans and things like that, but I also specialize in fitness, where I write training plans and things like that as well. Before, taking on my role as a nutritionist and really putting an emphasis on that and chronic illness reversal, I actually started as a personal trainer and then, gradually migrated into strength and conditioning, performance enhancement, corrective exercise, that kind of thing, and then nutrition afterwards.
Awesome.
Yeah, so
Awesome.
I cover both aspects there.
Well, man, thank you so much for coming on and helping us dispel some of these myths. Now people know they can go ahead and eat them some grapes and they're not going to die from them because they don't have no big old seeds in them. You can go ahead and get your seedless watermelon. You're going to be all right, and stop looking at people who are overweight thinking it's just because they just gluttonous and eating a whole bunch of stuff. It's other things that are going on. And so if we get about 500 likes, I know you guys are going to want to hear more from Remson if you don't contact for a one-on-one, but we can do a Q&A and have him come on live to answer your questions. Because I know some of those folks that are sticklers about seedless stuff are going to want to argue with Brother Remson about that whole issue. So if we get 500 likes, we'll have him come back and we'll do a live because he ain't scared of y'all. He ain't scared of what y'all got to say.
Yeah, I enjoy it. I really do. Yeah.
So Remson, man, thank you so much. This information has been so valuable. I know that our listeners are going to get a lot from it, and it's going to really help them be healthier. And so, man, thank you for all the work that you do.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.